What happens when a wedding night turns into a medical mystery that baffles an entire frontier town? When a giant virgin bride cries out in agony, and a humble rancher discovers something no one expected. Witness this unbelievable, true inspired story right here on Whisper of the Past. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. Let's get started. The year was 1887, and the small frontier town of Copper Ridge, Montana was buzzing with excitement. After months of correspondence through mail-order bride advertisements, Big Jack Morrison, a prosperous cattle rancher, was finally getting married. His bride, Helena Anderson, had traveled all the way from Sweden, and when she stepped off that dusty stagecoach, the entire town stopped to stare. Helena wasn't just tall, she was magnificent. Standing at 6 feet 4 inches, she towered over every man and woman in Copper Ridge. Her golden hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall of wheat, and her porcelain skin seemed to glow in the harsh Montana sun. The townspeople whispered among themselves. Some called her an Amazon. Others said she looked like a Viking goddess come to life. Big Jack himself was no small man at 6 feet 2 inches, but even he had to look up slightly to meet his bride's eyes. Yet there was something tender in the way they looked at each other during the simple ceremony at the town's wooden church. Helena spoke broken English, her Swedish accent thick and musical. Jack spoke no Swedish at all. But love, they say, needs no translation. The wedding celebration was modest but joyful. The town hall was decorated with wildflowers, and the local women had prepared a feast of roasted venison, fresh bread, and berry pie. Helena smiled throughout the evening, though her hands trembled slightly when she held her glass of cider. This was, after all, her wedding night, and she was an innocent bride about to begin a new life in a foreign land with a man she barely knew, as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Jack and Helena made their way to his ranch house, a sturdy log cabin he'd built with his own hands. The townspeople waved and cheered, and old Mrs. Patterson called out blessings in a voice cracked with age and whiskey. Inside the cabin, Jack had done his best to make things comfortable. Fresh linens covered the bed, candles flickered on the windowsill, and he'd even picked some lupines and placed them in a tin can by the bedside. Helena's eyes filled with tears at the gesture, and she squeezed Jack's calloused hand. What happened next would become the most talked about event in Copper Ridge history. Jack, being a gentleman despite his rough exterior, gave Helena privacy to change into her nightgown. When she emerged from behind the wooden screen, she looked ethereal in white cotton, her long hair loose around her shoulders. They both knew what was expected on a wedding night, but there was genuine affection in Jack's eyes as he approached her. They began awkwardly, as many newlyweds do, especially in an era when such matters were never openly discussed. But within moments, Helena's face contorted in pain. She gasped, then cried out in Swedish words Jack couldn't understand. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to pull away. Wait, Jack said, confused and concerned. Are you hurt? Helena's English failed her in that moment of panic, but finally she managed to whisper, "It hurts, I can't close my leg." Jack immediately stopped, his face flushed with embarrassment and worry. This wasn't right, something was very wrong. Helena was trembling, pale as fresh snow, and the pain in her eyes was unmistakable. This wasn't the normal discomfort a virgin bride might experience. This was something else entirely. "Let me look," Jack said gently, reaching for the oil lamp to bring more light into the room. Helena nodded through her tears, modesty abandoned in the face of genuine agony. The rancher reached down and found something that made his blood run cold. There, protruding from between Helena's legs, was a hard, irregular mass. At first, in the dim light, Jack thought he was seeing things, but as he looked closer, his eyes widened in horror and disbelief. It was a tumor, a massive growth that had likely been there for years, hidden beneath layers of clothing and Swedish modesty. The growth was the size of a man's fist, hard and unyielding. No wonder Helena couldn't close her legs properly. No wonder she was in such agony. The miracle was that she'd managed to make the long journey from Sweden without anyone discovering her condition. Jack's hands shook as he covered Helena with a blanket. "We need to get you to Doc Miller, right now." But Helena grabbed his arm, her eyes wild with fear and shame. "No," she begged in broken English. "They send me back. I have nowhere to go. Please." Through tears and halting words, Helena's story emerged. She discovered the growth years ago in Sweden. Too poor and ashamed to seek help, she'd hidden it, bound herself tightly, and endured the pain. When the opportunity came to be a mail-order bride, she'd seen it as her last chance at a normal life. She'd hoped, naively, that somehow it wouldn't matter, or that a husband in America might have access to doctors who could help. Jack Morrison was a simple rancher, not an educated man, but he had a good heart. He looked at this giant woman, so vulnerable despite her impressive stature, crying on his wedding bed, and his heart broke for her. "Helena," he said firmly, taking her hands in his, "you're my wife now. That means I take care of you. We're going to Doc Miller, and we're going to fix this, I promise you." The ride into town that night became legendary. Big Jack Morrison, carrying his giant bride in his arms like she weighed nothing, pounding on Doc Miller's door at midnight, shouting for help. The old doctor, roused from sleep, took one look at Helena's condition and immediately called for his wife to assist and for his medical books. What Doc Miller found was a dermoid cyst, a rare type of tumor that had been growing for possibly a decade. It was filled with tissue, hair, and even fragments that resembled teeth, a grotesque reminder of human development gone awry. In 1887 Montana, such a surgery was incredibly dangerous, but leaving it untreated meant certain death, either from infection or from the tumor's continued growth. The operation took 3 hours. Jack Morrison never left the doctor's office, pacing the wooden floors until they creaked, praying to a God he'd rarely spoken to before. When Doc Miller finally emerged, exhausted and covered in blood, he simply nodded. "She'll live. Your wife is stronger than any woman I've ever treated." Helena's recovery took months. The town of Copper Ridge, which had gossiped and stared, now rallied around the couple. Women brought food and helped with nursing. Men assisted Jack with the ranch so he could stay by his wife's side. And Jack? He never once complained, never showed anything but devotion. Every evening he sat by Helena's bed, holding her hand, learning Swedish words, teaching her English, building a language only they could speak. When Helena finally stood again, she stood taller than ever, not just in height but in spirit. The giant virgin bride had become a survivor, and the simple rancher had become her hero. Their marriage lasted 43 years, until Jack's death in 1930. They never had children, but they became parents to every orphan and struggling soul in Copper Ridge. Helena became a midwife, using her own experience to help other women facing difficult conditions. She was never ashamed again. This incredible story reminds us that love isn't always beautiful or easy. Sometimes it's messy, painful, and requires courage we didn't know we had. Sometimes it means reaching down into the darkness and finding something unexpected, then choosing to face it together. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button and subscribe to Whisper of the Past for more incredible true stories from history. Share this video and let us know in the comments what you think about Helena and Jack's remarkable love story. Until next time, remember that the past whispers lessons for those willing to listen.